There is an incredibly terrifying paradox that once happened right in the middle of the Hollywood film capital. An action superstar was put on trial for crossing the line with two underage fangirls. By normal logic, his career should have ended immediately. But no, outside the courthouse, thousands of devoted fangirls were still crying desperately, pushing and shoving to the point of tearing the buttons off their idol's shirt just to defend him. This man was later acquitted. His name even became a popular catchphrase to praise a playboy lifestyle. What is the truth behind this? Let actor secrets help you uncover the answer behind this rotten story of the entertainment industry. During the vibrant and booming 1940s, the global entertainment landscape possessed one undisputed king of the silver screen. Errol Flynn was not just a working actor. He was an unprecedented international phenomenon and the ultimate perfect symbol of romantic action. Millions of moviegoers across the globe idolized his legendary, larger-than-life portrayals of daring heroes, most notably his truly iconic role as Robin Hood. He possessed a seemingly flawless physical appearance, a genuinely charming smile, and a magnetic, captivating energy that consistently made him the biggest box office draw of his era. Men desperately wanted to emulate his rugged bravery, and women utterly swooned over his intensely romantic on-screen persona. However, hiding right behind this carefully manufactured, exceptionally profitable heroic image, Flynn lived a dangerously reckless, dark, and wild lifestyle. The A-lister fully utilized his immense wealth and his untouchable Hollywood power to freely indulge his most dangerous desires, operating every single day as though the normal, standard rules of society simply did not apply to him. That glittering, seemingly untouchable illusion suddenly shattered into a million pieces in October 1942. District Attorney John F. Dockweiler took an unprecedented, remarkably bold step by officially charging the global superstar with three severe legal charges. The charges involved severely inappropriate, forceful conduct with two young female fans who had not yet reached the legal age of consent. In any normal, properly functioning society, this horrific revelation would instantly and permanently destroy a man's public reputation. The American public would naturally turn their backs in utter disgust. The local legal system stepped in, but Flynn simply utilized his vast financial resources, quickly posting a $1,000 bail to casually walk right out of jail. He remained free, continuing his luxurious, carefree life while awaiting his high-stakes, intensely publicized trial. The exact moment the legal proceedings officially commenced in Los Angeles, the story shifted from standard legal proceedings into a terrifying, profoundly disturbing display of mass public delusion. The scene outside the local courthouse instantly transformed into an utter, uncontrolled media frenzy. This was not a quiet, respectful search for justice. Instead of a furious, angry mob demanding strict accountability and protection for the young victims, the city streets were flooded with Errol Flynn's devoted, fanatical supporters. Thousands of frantic female fans surrounded the legal building, creating an immense, chaotic, and impenetrable blockade that thoroughly paralyzed the surrounding downtown traffic. These were not just casual, curious observers hoping to catch a quick glimpse for the evening news. They were intensely obsessed, fiercely loyal followers who willingly ignored the horrific, predatory nature of the criminal accusations. The level of sheer blind fanaticism on display was truly staggering for journalists and rational citizens to witness. Women of all ages stood for countless hours in the sweltering, unbearably uncomfortable California heat just to catch a tiny fleeting glimpse of the accused superstar. The public dedication reached such an extreme, bizarre level that some desperate fans actually brought heavy military-grade binoculars to the courthouse. They stood on their tiptoes, balanced precariously on street signs, and climbed directly onto the metal roofs of parked cars just to peer desperately through the distant glass windows of the courtroom. Whenever Errol Flynn stepped out of his private luxury vehicle, the immense crowd did not boo or shout any insults. Instead, they erupted into deafening, fiercely hysterical cheers. The sheer physical force of the surging mob was genuinely terrifying to experience. The frantic crowd violently pushed, shoved, and trampled directly over one another, desperately thrusting pens, notebooks, and glossy photograph forward to beg the accused man for his personal autograph. The public mania reached such a fever pitch that armed security guards and security personnel could barely hold back the crushing, relentless wave of human bodies. In their manic, unstoppable desperation to physically touch their beloved cinematic idol, women actually lunged forward and grabbed wildly at his clothing. The mob violently ripped the buttons right off his expensive custom-tailored suits, treating the damaged fabric like sacred, priceless religious relics. These supporters treated a powerful, wealthy man actively accused of exploiting vulnerable underage girls exactly like a returning triumphant war hero. Inside the courtroom, whenever Flynn took the witness stand and smoothly, calmly denied any wrongdoing, those specific details would quickly filter out to the vast crowd waiting impatiently on the street. Upon hearing his confident denials, hundreds of grown women outside would instantly break down into hysterical, heavy tears. They wept openly and loudly out of profound sympathy for the accused perpetrator. The crowd thoroughly convinced themselves that their handsome, wealthy hero was the actual tragic victim of a cruel, carefully calculated, and fiercely malicious conspiracy. The collective public delusion was so incredibly powerful and intense that the Los Angeles municipal authorities frequently feared a full-scale violent public riot might break out if the final verdict did not go in his favor. This profoundly unsettling madness, however, wasn't strictly limited to the hysterical female fans outside the courthouse doors. A very significant, incredibly vocal portion of the American male population also rushed forward to aggressively defend his reckless, predatory behavior. A well-organized group of men actually banded together to form an official public support organization dedicated solely to protecting his severely tarnished image. They proudly and openly named it the American Boys Club for the Defense of Errol Flynn, which the national press commonly referred to by the simple, catchy acronym ABCDEF. Even prominent, formally educated public figures, including a young political activist named William F. Buckley, Jr., enthusiastically threw their unwavering support behind this bizarre, profoundly offensive movement. These men did not just actively attempt to excuse the horrific legal allegations. The group actively celebrated his incredibly toxic lifestyle. They viewed his alleged wildly inappropriate actions with underage fans as a grand badge of honor, a powerful symbol of ultimate masculinity. rather than a disgusting, strictly illegal crime that destroyed lives. The chaotic circus surrounding that Los Angeles courthouse perfectly and tragically illustrated a sick, twisted reality firmly embedded within American celebrity culture. The general public was more than willing to willingly abandon basic morality, logical critical thinking, and fundamental human decency, as long as the accused perpetrator possessed a globally famous face and a charming $1 million Hollywood smile. The overwhelming, relentless media frenzy proved beyond any doubt that in the golden age of cinema, extreme fame operated as a terrifying, impenetrable shield, blinding the masses to the dark, ugly truth standing right in front of them. The blinding loyalty of those crowds outside the courthouse built on a carefully manufactured cinematic illusion. This specific illusion existed specifically to conceal the truly predatory reality operating behind the velvet ropes of Hollywood's most exclusive parties. Peeling back the glamorous, flawlessly polished curtain exposes the private, deeply secluded playgrounds of the American ultra-rich during the 1940s. Fame, power, and unimaginable wealth weaponized themselves to manipulate and destroy those defenseless. Errol Flynn possessed an extravagant, sprawling symbol of his limitless wealth and his unchecked power. He owned a magnificent luxury yacht named the Sirocco. In the golden era of American cinema, a private vessel of this magnitude operated strictly as a floating, untouchable fortress of ultimate indulgence. The ship existed isolated from the prying eyes of the press, the restrictive laws of the mainland, and the basic moral codes of everyday society. The Sirocco represented the absolute pinnacle of high society extravagance, frequently dropping anchor off the sun-drenched coast of Catalina Island. For anyone just entering life and desperately attempting to navigate the ruthless entertainment industry, receiving an exclusive invitation to board the Sirocco felt exactly like winning a golden ticket to the top of the Hollywood food chain. It served as a dazzling, intoxicating trap wrapped tightly in polished mahogany wood, expensive imported champagne, and the blinding aura of global superstardom. The yacht provided the perfect, inescapable hunting ground for a wealthy predator. In August of 1941, this luxurious trap slammed firmly shut around a vulnerable, unsuspecting target. Peggy Satterlee, an aspiring young actress, desperately wanted to make a legitimate name for herself in the fiercely competitive film business. She viewed the famous actor as a respected industry veteran and a powerful mentor figure. The world-famous star dangled the ultimate professional bait, casually inviting her to spend a weekend aboard his legendary floating palace. Surrounded by the vast, dark ocean, cut off from any form of mainland communication or immediate rescue, the terrifying reality of the situation rapidly unfolded. During her very first night on the water, the celebrated heroic figure abandoned his charming public persona. Without any warning or permission, he bypassed the locked door of Peggy's private quarters. He cornered the deeply frightened young actress in the tightly confined, inescapable space of the lower deck. The powerful actor aggressively forced her to endure a severe physical ordeal against her desperate, crying will. He utilized his immense physical strength and his overwhelming industry status to crush her personal defenses in the middle of the sea. Out there on the isolated water, the loud crashing waves easily swallowed her frantic screams for help, leaving her at his mercy. The psychological manipulation and calculated cruelty continued far beyond that initial night of violence. The experienced predator knew exactly how to twist reality and maintain firm control over his isolated floating environment. The very next evening, Flynn employed a sickeningly deceptive, intensely manipulative tactic to isolate her once again. The actor changed his demeanor, adopting a gentle, disarmingly romantic tone. He casually invited Peggy into his personal quarters under the innocent, poetic guise of gazing at the moon through the large, circular cabin window. The perpetrator utilized a classic manufactured cinematic setup designed specifically to lower her defensive guard and create a false sense of security. The exact moment she stepped into the room to look at the night sky, the romantic facade instantly vanished. He violently trapped her inside the cabin and subjected her to another horrific ordeal. This chilling repetition proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that his actions were carefully calculated, systematically repeated behaviors designed to break down and consume someone just stepping into the adult world. The young actress endured unimaginable terror, trapped on a luxury vessel with a celebrated monster. This terrifying pattern of utilizing extreme luxury to mask violent exploitation extended directly from the open, lawless ocean into the gated, immensely wealthy neighborhoods of Los Angeles. Fast forward to September 27th, 1942. The dangerous setting shifted from the rolling waves of Catalina Island to a sprawling, magnificent Bel Air mansion owned by wealthy socialite Fred McEvoy. These multi-million-dollar American estates operated as private, unregulated kingdoms. The Hollywood elite threw notoriously wild, excessive weekend parties far away from the flashing cameras of the local paparazzi. The air inside these sprawling mansions always hung thick with expensive liquor, loud jazz music, and an unspoken, incredibly dangerous understanding. Powerful men freely took whatever they wanted without facing any earthly consequences. They lived by a different set of rules, protected by studio lawyers and elite public relations departments. On this specific night of extreme excess, another individual just entering life found herself hopelessly trapped inside this glittering nightmare. Her name was Betty Hansen. Overwhelmed by the dazzling environment, the loud music, and the sheer social pressure of mingling with the Hollywood elite, she consumed far too much alcohol. The young guest rapidly became severely intoxicated, losing her physical coordination and her fundamental ability to protect herself from harm. In a room full of powerful, wealthy adults, standard human decency dictates immediate intervention. Someone should offer a glass of water and ensure the vulnerable guest finds a safe, quiet place to sleep. Instead of offering basic human protection, the King of Hollywood recognized a golden, unguarded opportunity. Flynn approached Betty, wrapped his arm around her waist, and quietly guided her away from the crowded, noisy party on the main floor. He led her directly up the grand staircase to a secluded, empty bedroom on the second floor. In that quiet, isolated room, Errol Flynn took horrific advantage of Betty's incapacitated state. The famous actor forced her to endure a terrible, severely traumatic experience while she possessed absolutely no physical strength to fight back, resist, or scream for help. The movie star exploited her extreme vulnerability with chilling efficiency. The darkest, most sickening layer of this entire Bel Air nightmare occurred immediately after the famous actor finished his horrific actions and casually walked out of the upstairs bedroom. The Hollywood system functioned on complicity and the silent, aggressive protection of powerful men. After Flynn departed, leaving Betty lying helpless on the bed, 3 separate employees from the powerful Warner Brothers film studio quietly slipped into that exact same room. One by one, these corporate fixers, men whose daily jobs involved protecting the studio's billion-dollar assets, proceeded to commit their own terrible violations against her. They viewed her incapacitated state as an open invitation to participate in a violent, systemic feeding frenzy. The luxurious Bel Air mansion and the sprawling yacht functioned strictly as carefully organized, protected hunting grounds. The richest men in America used their unimaginable wealth to lure, trap, and utterly destroy the innocent. They operated with absolute confidence, knowing their ruthless studio bosses would always sweep the shattered pieces directly under the expensive rugs, preserving the highly profitable illusion for the adoring public. The horrors that unfolded behind the closed doors of those lavish estates and floating palaces soon transitioned into a different type of public violence inside the Los Angeles courtroom. When immensely profitable Hollywood stars face severe legal consequences, the major studios utterly refused to surrender their biggest financial assets to the blind scales of justice. Warner Brothers immediately activated their ultimate defense protocol to protect their golden boy from a lengthy prison sentence. The powerful executives hired the most feared, politically connected, and astronomically expensive celebrity defense attorney in America, a man named Jerry Geisler. He built his entire legendary career on making high-profile Hollywood scandals simply disappear into thin air. His strategy for this specific, intensely publicized trial relied on a remarkably cruel, fiercely effective legal maneuver. He decided to put the young, vulnerable victims on trial instead of the wealthy, accused perpetrator. Geisler executed his first brilliant, intensely manipulative move during the initial jury selection process. The American legal framework relies on the jury system, a process where ordinary, everyday citizens listen to the presented evidence and ultimately decide the final verdict of guilt or innocence. Geisler meticulously engineered a jury panel composed of 9 women and only 3 men. He possessed a deep, terrifying understanding of the intense, almost hypnotic psychological effect his famous client had on the general female demographic. The seasoned lawyer calculated perfectly that a predominantly female jury would naturally sympathize with the handsome, charming superstar they idolized on the movie screens. He knew these women would simultaneously judge the young, terrified female accusers with extreme, unforgiving harshness, viewing them as jealous rivals rather than genuine victims of exploitation. Once the eagerly anticipated trial officially began, Geisler unleashed a relentless, brutal courtroom campaign built on victim blaming. In the American legal and cultural landscape, victim blaming operates as an incredibly toxic, profoundly destructive defense strategy. The attorney actively shifts the moral and legal fault away from the powerful abuser and places the heavy responsibility onto the shoulders of the person who actually suffered the harm. The ruthless defense team deployed this precise tactic against Betty Hansen with devastating, calculated precision. Geisler aggressively dug into Betty's private life, twisting her personal history and misrepresenting her social habits to paint her as a promiscuous, manipulative gold digger. He actively convinced the jury that she deliberately sought out the wealthy actor to extort his immense fortune. The defense lawyer needed to visually and thoroughly break her credibility right in front of the jury box. To achieve this, he orchestrated an intensely theatrical, absurd, physical stunt. Geisler dispatched a specialized team directly to the Bel Air mansion. They physically removed the heavy wooden door from that specific second-floor bedroom and dragged the massive piece of architecture directly into the center of the courtroom. Geisler proudly and loudly demonstrated to the captivated jury that the metal lock on that specific door was already broken and non-functional long before the night of the chaotic party. He forcefully argued that since the lock was broken, Flynn could never have physically locked Betty inside the room. By proving she was not physically trapped by a sliding deadbolt, the defense team successfully implanted a dangerously persuasive idea into the minds of the jurors. Geisler implied that the severely intoxicated girl could have simply turned the handle and walked away at any moment, suggesting she willingly stayed and consented to the tragic encounter. The legal assassination of Peggy Satterlee required an even more complex, intricately calculated level of theatrical deception. Geisler initiated his aggressive attack by proving Peggy had previously falsified her birth year on official studio employment documents to secure minor acting roles. This single, relatively common industry revelation allowed the defense attorney to formally brand her as a habitual pathological liar who could never be trusted to tell the truth under oath. Geisler then targeted the specific chilling detail of Flynn, inviting Peggy to look at the moon through the circular cabin window on the luxury yacht. The defense attorney utilized his vast legal budget to hire a professional credentialed astronomer to testify as an expert witness for the court. This distinguished scientist stood before the jury and presented very complex mathematical calculations. He detailed the exact wind direction, the specific tilted angle of the anchored boat, and the precise celestial positioning of the moon on that exact night in August. The astronomer confidently testified that it was scientifically, physically impossible to view the moon from that specific lower deck window at that exact recorded hour. This technical, incredibly theatrical scientific presentation thoroughly shattered Peggy's desperate testimony. The defense successfully made her appear delusional, incredibly manipulative, and fundamentally untrustworthy to the captivated, star-struck jury. Geisler saved his most destructive, severely traumatizing psychological weapon for the absolute final blow against Peggy's character. He aimed to annihilate Peggy's public dignity and destroy her psychological stability right in front of the packed courtroom and the flashing cameras of the national press. The defense attorney aggressively cornered the young girl on the wooden witness stand and forced her to publicly confess a fiercely guarded, incredibly damaging personal secret. He relentlessly pressured her with rapid-fire questions until she tearfully admitted to previously undergoing a highly secretive medical procedure to terminate a pregnancy. In the deeply conservative, firmly religious society of the 1940s, this specific medical procedure was strictly illegal and carried an immense, inescapable social stigma. Exposing this painful secret ruined her reputation overnight, transforming her from a sympathetic victim into a social outcast. To finalize her character assassination, Geisler introduced bizarre, unverified rumors claiming Peggy had previously exhibited strange, inappropriate behavior while visiting a local city morgue. The defense team systematically built a horrifying, fabricated public portrait of a mentally unstable, morally bankrupt, and deeply manipulative young woman who was desperate for fame and attention. The well-paid legal team successfully transformed Betty and Peggy into the actual villains of the entire media spectacle. They weaponized the girls' vulnerabilities, their youthful mistakes, and their unspoken trauma to create a perfectly crafted false narrative. Betty and Peggy walked into that guarded courthouse seeking basic human justice, desperately hoping the legal system would protect them from a powerful predator. Instead, they encountered a ruthless, funded corporate machine designed to crush their spirits and erase their terrible truth. Betty and Peggy were publicly humiliated, stripped of their dignity, and forced to endure the agonizing, isolating pain of watching the entire country actively turn against them. Errol Flynn simply sat comfortably at the polished defense table, wearing his signature charming smile and dressed in a tailored suit. He quietly watched his high-priced lawyer systematically destroy the lives of Betty and Peggy, whom he had already broken behind closed doors. The Hollywood elite proved beyond any reasonable doubt that they could buy their way out of any consequence, rewriting reality to ensure the king kept his shiny crown. The ruthless character assassination orchestrated by the defense team worked exactly as they intended, thoroughly manipulating the minds of the jury. On February 6, 1943, the highly anticipated legal proceedings reached their final dramatic climax. The handpicked jury members retreated into their private chambers to deliberate the fate of Errol Flynn. The entire entertainment industry held its collective breath, nervously waiting to see if their incredibly profitable golden boy would actually face the consequences of his actions. The jury deliberated for exactly 24 hours. This remarkably brief window of time decided the entire future of Betty and Peggy. The jurors returned to the packed courtroom, stood firmly before the judge, and delivered a crushing, utterly devastating blow to the pursuit of justice. They officially declared Errol Flynn innocent of all charges. Flynn walked away from the severe allegations unscathed, his glittering career perfectly intact and his immense fortune secure. The immediate aftermath of this verdict presented a heartbreaking, profoundly enraging contrast between two different realities. On one side of the heavy wooden courthouse doors, Betty and Peggy faced absolute, total ruin. They walked out of the legal building carrying an immense permanent burden of public humiliation. The trial successfully stripped them of their dignity, their privacy, and their basic human worth. The massive crowds of devoted fans waiting outside did not offer them a single ounce of sympathy. Instead, the fanatic supporters actively jeered, hissed, and hurled vicious insults at Betty and Peggy as they quietly retreated to their waiting vehicles. Their personal reputations lay shattered on the concrete pavement, their futures in the entertainment industry permanently erased. They faded directly into the heavy shadows, forced to live the rest of their lives carrying the toxic, cruelly unfair label of manipulative liars. The legal system utterly failed them, and the society around them actively cheered for their destruction. On the exact opposite side of this tragedy, the acquitted Errol Flynn immediately transitioned into a state of wild, uninhibited celebration. He felt zero remorse and displayed zero self-reflection regarding his dangerously reckless actions. instead of quietly retreating from the immense public spectacle to show a basic level of respect for the severity of the situation, he fully embraced the legal victory with a lavish, extremely inappropriate display of sheer arrogance. Flynn immediately traveled to the private Los Angeles residence of Aggie Underwood. She worked as a very prominent, sympathetic newspaper reporter who actively covered the trial favorably for the defense team. Inside her cozy home, the actor hosted a massive, wildly enthusiastic spaghetti dinner party. The expensive champagne and hard liquor flowed freely throughout the entire night. He surrounded himself with loyal friends, powerful studio executives, and friendly journalists. They raised their glasses high, enthusiastically toasting his brilliant legal escape, while Betty and Peggy wept in isolated silence. The sheer audacity of eating a joyful, booze-filled spaghetti dinner just hours after tearing apart Betty and Peggy's lives perfectly illustrated the absolute moral bankruptcy of the Hollywood elite. The loud laughter echoing through that house served as a chilling reminder of his untouchable, protected status. The national press eagerly joined this disturbing celebration, acting as the ultimate public relations machine for the major film studios. The powerful newspapers rewrote the entire narrative of the trial to protect the valuable cinematic asset, Errol Flynn, and ensure future box office revenues remained exceptionally high. Journalists aggressively painted the experienced Errol Flynn as a naive, innocent victim. They published widespread editorial pieces claiming he was helplessly trapped by calculating, sophisticated young women looking for a quick payday. The media transformed a powerful, wealthy man into a sympathetic, deeply misunderstood hero. The general public eagerly swallowed this fabricated narrative, preferring the comforting illusion of their beloved action star over the dark, ugly reality of his predatory actions. Society readily accepted the lie because holding their idol accountable required confronting the toxic culture they actively participated in every single day. This staggering societal failure eventually birthed one of the most toxic, profoundly disturbing cultural catchphrases in American history. Following his intensely publicized acquittal, the general public started enthusiastically using the phrase "in like Flynn." This specific slang term rapidly embedded itself directly into the everyday American vocabulary. People used it to describe someone who quickly and successfully achieved a difficult goal, particularly regarding romantic conquest or escaping severe consequences. Men across the entire country casually threw the phrase around in bars, offices, and social gatherings, using it as a high compliment for smooth talkers and successful playboys. The term became a highly coveted badge of honor, a verbal trophy for men who operated outside the boundaries of basic morality. The entire society actively took a horrific series of events involving vulnerable young individuals and twisted it into a lighthearted celebratory joke. The cultural normalization of this phrase proved exactly how deeply the rot penetrated the society of the 1940s. Every single time someone used that phrase to congratulate a friend, they actively minimized the severe trauma endured by the victims. The American public willingly and enthusiastically normalized the severe exploitation of the vulnerable. They chose to actively applaud the powerful perpetrator, cementing his legacy as a legendary playboy rather than a dangerous threat. The creation and widespread adoption of this phrase demonstrated a profound lack of empathy from the general public. They rewarded his reckless behavior with lasting cultural immortality. The masses forever linked his famous name to the concept of getting away with the worst actions imaginable simply because he possessed immense wealth, global fame, and a charming smile on the silver screen. The justice system cleared his name, but the society elevated him to a cultural legend, leaving the true victims forgotten in the dust of Hollywood history. While the general public was busy turning a deeply traumatic event into a catchy punchline, the harsh reality of consequence was slowly catching up to Errol Flynn. The manipulated legal victory successfully kept Flynn out of a cold prison cell, but it could not protect him from his own intensely destructive habits. The massive pedestal he stood upon slowly began to crack under the heavy weight of his endless excess. Flynn's carefully cultivated image as a brave, daring cinematic hero suffered an irreparable blow in the unforgiving court of public opinion. When everyday Americans eventually realized their beloved action star actively avoided mandatory military service during the brutal height of the Second World War, the glittering charm quickly soured. The brave, sword-wielding hero of the silver screen was exposed as a privileged man hiding comfortably behind his studio connections while ordinary citizens fought and died overseas. Combined with his increasingly reckless personal life, endless public scandals, and a severe dependency on hard alcohol, his undeniable star power rapidly faded. The powerful executives at the Warner Brothers film studio, the exact same corporate machine that previously spent a fortune to destroy the credibility of his accusers, finally reached their ultimate breaking point. By 1950, they looked at their former top box office earner and saw nothing but a massive financial liability. They unceremoniously terminated his highly lucrative contract, effectively cutting off his primary source of wealth and industry protection. Stripped of his elite studio shield and blowing through his personal fortune with astonishing speed, he spiraled into physical and financial ruin. His body, ravaged by decades of extreme indulgence, finally gave out. He suffered a fatal heart attack and died bankrupt at the surprisingly young age of 50. Witnesses noted he looked decades older than his actual years, a ruined hollow shell of the handsome leading man who once captivated the globe. In a deeply tragic tribute to his destructive lifestyle, his remaining Hollywood friends buried him with 6 full bottles of premium whiskey, sending him into the dark ground with the very poison that ruined him. As Errol Flynn slowly drank himself into a premature grave, Betty and Peggy were forced to navigate a different kind of agonizing lifelong punishment. They never received a massive studio payout, a public apology, or a glamorous Hollywood comeback story. Instead, they faded into painful quiet and profoundly isolated obscurity. They were forced to carry the heavy, unjust labels placed upon them by the ruthless legal defense team. The most heartbreaking, cruel irony of this entire saga belongs to Peggy Satterlee. Peggy eventually ended up working as a lowly ticket taker at a local movie house just to survive. She spent her days standing quietly in the dim shadows, tearing paper stubs for the exact same cinematic machine that aggressively chewed her up and violently spit her out. The forgotten victim had to stand there, unrecognized, while audiences eagerly lined up to watch the very men who actively destroyed her life. Betty and Peggy stand as tragic, permanent symbols of the voiceless and the vulnerable, crushed beneath the suffocating weight of blind celebrity worship. Time often provides a terrifying clarity that an obsessed society lacks in the present moment. When we re examine this historical tragedy through a modern, formally educated lens, the sheer scale of the systemic corruption becomes even more horrifying to comprehend. According to a groundbreaking book published in 2026 by investigative author Patricia O'Brien, that infamous Los Angeles courtroom circus likely served a much darker, far more sinister purpose than previously imagined. Her extensive research suggests the intensely publicized trial was not just a desperate mission to save one single famous actor. It was a carefully coordinated cover-up designed specifically to protect a vast, firmly entrenched underground network operating within the Hollywood elite. This terrifying network allegedly targeted underage vulnerable individuals systematically, utilizing extreme wealth and absolute studio power to trap their victims while deploying corrupt officials to permanently silence any threats to their entertainment empire. This incredibly dark chapter in entertainment history serves as a chilling permanent warning about the extreme dangers of idolizing flawed human beings. When a society collectively chooses to blindly worship a famous face on a giant screen, they willingly surrender their own moral compass. This deeply unsettling story proves beyond any doubt that when the masses prioritize glamorous illusions over fundamental justice, the actual victims are always the ones who are forced to serve the heaviest, most agonizing sentences. The true cost of fame is subsidized by the shattered lives of the innocent. When the director yells, "Cut," the cameras stop rolling, but the trauma for these actresses does not. What we have just seen is proof of a toxic power dynamic, where art becomes a shield for abuse and silence is bought with fame. It is time for the truth to be heard. What are your thoughts on this dark reality? Leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to Actor Secrets as we continue to expose the dark side of Hollywood. Thanks for watching.